What's up, listeners? It's Andrea. Today, this is just not a good day for randos. The Borg are back, and this time it's personal. And we ask the question, what the heck, Picard? Come nerd out with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're talking Season 6, Episode 26, Descent, Part 1. This is a cliffhanger Season 6 finale. This was written by Jerry Taylor and directed by the great Ronald D. Moore. The Borg begin a new offensive against the Federation, but this time they're acting as individuals, like very shades of hue. Mm-hmm. And Data experiences his first emotions while fighting them.
I am so excited about this episode. I can't even deal. I have a few initial thoughts, but mostly I just want to dig in. But before we go to initial thoughts, we have a special guest today that I would love to introduce. Joining us today is our friend Pip, who has been listening to our show from the beginning, basically. And she's a huge TNG superfan, just like us. And she's here to talk about Descent Part 1 and Descent Part 2 for reasons that will be obvious after we hear her introduction. So, Pip, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. So, Pip, two things we always ask our guests. One, how did you get into TNG? And two, who's your favorite character and why?
Okay, well, I started watching TNG my first year of university, I think, which was distressingly almost 20 years ago. And I started watching all of the original series and all the films, and then I went into Next Gen. And Data has always been my favorite character. But interestingly enough, I got an autism diagnosis 10 years after that. And then I rewatched it, and it was even more interesting watching him as a kind of autistic coded character. So yeah, he is still very much my favorite.
Oh, I love that. I love that you have someone that you can sort of identify with. And I know that there's been a lot of writing about how Data's search for humanity and like his kind of attempts to like be more human and sort of get into touch with like feelings and stuff. Very coded as like, this is what people on the spectrum like have to struggle with a lot and whatnot. And I love that they made this artificial life form be sort of a touchstone for lots of people who feel like they might be missing a connection or something, where it's like, oh, now I see why Data wants this like explicitly explained, stuff like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that too, because oftentimes in the show, I've been like, Data's way better. I don't understand his fascination with humanity. He's better in like every way you could be better. And I think you're right. For humans who don't have the option to be Data, you're still a human. You still have to interact emotionally with people in the world. Then it would behoove you to understand emotions, to figure out how that works, even if you yourself don't totally get it, but to at least recognize it, to know like, oh, this face means sad. This face means happy. This face means whatever, just so you can relate and understand other people. It does make a lot of sense in the world. And Data's also my favorite. And I also felt like I did not get people growing up. And so I really related to Data because I was like, yeah, right. Like they're weird. But in any case.
And I'm over here being like, Deanna, like, I feel so much joy.
Gratitude and joy.
Oh, God. Oh, Deanna. Well, so Pip, what are your initial thoughts on Descent Part 1?
It's difficult because I watched them back to back, obviously, before this, and it's difficult to kind of think of part 1 without thinking about the entire thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier a little bit about how we felt that there's so much in part 1, even though it's like the setup. And I found I took so many more notes, and I was so much more kind of, I don't know, like finding so much more to think about in that first one. I don't know if that's just because part 2 Law's in it, and I was kind of distracted by how great he is.
I know.
But yeah, I absolutely love these two episodes.
Right on. Shereese, how about you? What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think next to Time's Arrow and the episode about Lol, this is probably, and A Fistful of Datas. That one I really like too. So this is one of my favorite Data episodes. I thought that was my favorite, but then I thought about some others. I really like Time's Arrow. I think I put this above Time's Arrow, but I would put this below Fistful of Datas, and I would put the episode of Lol at the top. I think just because of
Obviously,
how they make me feel, right? Like Lal is so
Yeah.
sweet and beautiful, and Fistful of Datas is just hilarious and
It's
just
so fun.
such a fun, campy time. This one's a lot more dark and serious, right? Because you get like these Borg serial killers and stuff. So it's a little more serious, but it's such a great episode. Like this part one, to Pip's point, I feel like is a really meaty part one, which we don't always get. A lot of times part one is just a setup, but this time it felt like a complete episode that just happened to end on a cliffhanger. I really enjoyed this episode. Like all the facets and twists and turns, I was hooked. I was totally engaged. And I kept putting myself in Data's shoes and then in Geordi's shoes, you know, back and forth and being like, how would I be in this situation? How would I be with a friend in this situation? Yeah, so I really, really enjoyed part one. What about you, Andrea?
You know what? I don't remember, you know, going into it, I didn't remember a lot of part one. So in my notes, I wrote, this is the one where Data gets mad, right? Like that first couple of minutes where it's like,
correct.
right. So it's like that was like my initial sort of thought. And I remember not being a super huge fan of Descent part one and part two, but I will tell you, I'm going to just jump right to my final thoughts for part two, even like I was pleasantly surprised by how engaged I felt in these episodes, where I was like, oh yeah, he's trying to like explore his feelings and Laura's kind of like in charge of some Borg or something, right? Like it just sort of trailed off in my mind, but really there's just so much meat on this bone. There's like the manipulation portion, there's the exploration of like feelings and humanity kind of stuff, there's the friends being like, what are you doing? You know, there's lots going on, and you have, you know, just for the Federation, even someone who doesn't have skin in the game with like Data having emotions, the Borg are back and they're acting really weird for Borg, you know, where it's like, okay, we've got like 20 huge problems that we're going to have to try to solve in a very short amount of time. So I do have a fun little bit of trivia for you. Did you know that Brent Spiner plays Data and Lore in this episode?
You're kidding me.
You know what's so funny?
Next you're going to tell me that he plays Dr. Soong and all those other Soongs as well.
every and Lady Soong, who we don't see. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't play Lady Soong. But yeah, there's a scene in Descent Part 2 where Data and Lore are looking at each other, and we've seen this before, like from the beginning when we first saw Lore, where they're looking at each other, they
Riker
interact with each other.
2.0. Yeah,
and I actually thought about Riker and Riker 2.0, and I was like, wait a minute, because with Riker and Riker 2.0, the scene looked so bad. It looked very like
you could see the split screen. It's second chances, right?
They weren't looking at each other. They were looking over each other's shoulders.
Yeah,
and
kind of like towards each other.
Yeah, and I remember being like, oh, well, it was the 90s and they didn't have the technology, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw this. I was like, wait a minute. They did this before on the show. They did this with Data and Lore in season 1. They absolutely have the technology. I don't know whose fault that was, but somebody was to blame in Riker and Riker 2.0 not being seamless, because
someone
Data
got
and
fired
Lore
that day.
We can only hope.
Because Data and Lore look totally legit. Every scene they're in together, you're just like, But Riker and Riker 2.0, you're like, what the F?
Yeah.
So anyways, moving on. So this episode starts with a poker scene.
Yes.
Love a good poker game. And in this game, we see Data playing with a bunch of history's best minds. And I forgot this scene until it came up. I was like, oh yeah. And then I was like, wait, why? Like, does he have some question to ask them or something? And as they're playing, Data says why he's doing this. He says, well, I play poker with my friends on the ship because it helps me better understand humanity. And so I thought playing with the best minds of humanity would give me new insight. And I was like, I'm so glad that they had Data explain that, because I was like, who plays poker with these people? Like, why? I don't understand what you would get from this. But then when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Understanding humanity, not just from the bluffing standpoint, or maybe, you know, when are humans being deceitful, but playfully deceitful, versus how does this look when you're playing with a bunch of geniuses? I don't know. Yeah. I thought that was really interesting.
I love that then he also said, and so far it's been most illuminating and give them a lot of side eye because they're just arguing. My favorite bit being Newton just going, I invented physics. So good.
Don't patronize me, boy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Maybe pick a different genius.
So we've got Sir Isaac Newton, we've got Albert Einstein, and we've got Stephen Hawking, who is played by himself. He was the only person in TNG, I think it's actually the only guest in all of Star Trek that like played themselves, which I thought was so brilliant. Now, Dr. Hawking was a huge Star Trek fan, and he was invited to be on the show. And Ronald D. Moore said that on the day of his filming his scenes, the set was like overflowing with people who just wanted to witness this event. He was like, people were making up all kinds of bullshit excuses to come onto set because they've got work to do in air quotes. And they were just standing around like watching Stephen Hawking film his scenes. Now, there is a moment where, you know, they're talking about bluffing and Einstein and Hawking are kind of talking about this. And Hawking puts down his hand, which beats Einstein's hand. And he says, "Wrong again, Einstein," which is hilarious in joke because Stephen Hawking has spent his life like disproving a number of Einstein's theorems. And so he was like, "Wrong again, sucker."
Nerd joke.
I missed that. That went totally over my head. All I took from that scene, all I took from that scene was like the pure joy on Stephen Hawking's face. When the car came down, he was just like, "Hey, and it just made me, it made me smile and it made me laugh because the look on his face was just like, it just was jubilation and like
it was.
It was great. That was really fun.
It was, and by all intents and purposes, from what I've heard from Dr. Hawking, he was a hilarious, like pranky little scamp. I'm gonna speak for him because, you know, that's my right as someone who didn't know him at all. I feel like if he would be a character on Star Trek, he would probably be Q because he just had this very like mischievous sense of humor in real life that translated really well on screen. I thought it was so cool. It was so cool.
Yeah, and I think it was the right amount of this for the scene. I think if they would have gone like 5 minutes longer, I would have been like, shoot me now. So I think this was the perfect like sampler and to set up the whole episode and be like, okay, so this is going to be about Data's search for humanity and understanding humanity. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You know, it was a good setup, but it was a setup in a way that is really interesting because you're like, why are these genius? What? Huh? You know, it was a good hook.
It was like good exposition.
Exactly. So then we get a red alert from Riker and Data's like, on my way in program. And you're like, oh, he's in the holodeck, which is so funny because of course he's in the holodeck. Where else he's going to be with these people? But I totally wrote in my notes, Data's sitting in his quarters playing poker. And then when he's like in program, I was like, oh, wait, what?
Oh, duh.
How could he be in his quarters with Isaac Newton? What do you... Anyways, so holodeck.
But what he did bring from his quarters was his little poker visor.
I was going to say that there were two things that I loved about this. One was I wrote, I wish he reported to the bridge in the poker visor.
Yeah, oh my God,
Sadly,
how great would that be?
But I also love that at the end of the game when there's the red alert, he says, "Oh, we'll have to continue this another time, I'm afraid." To the character, it's so polite. It's like they're not actually there. You don't have to tell them that you're going to turn them off. It was so cute.
It is that weird sort of holodeck protocol where you can speak about warp nacelles and whatever in front of the Sherlock Holmes characters and they all just sort of blankly stare at the wall because they're not really there. They're not conscious and cognizant of like what's going on. So I do love that Data does that too, where he's like, "I'm so sorry, I have this thing I have to go to. I'll be right back." And they're like, "Who?" Yeah.
So next thing you see, we're on the bridge. And Riker's saying that there was a distress call from the Oniaka 3 outpost. And they're like, is there any kind of like military value or any, you know, fancy experiments going on there? There's absolutely no reason for anybody to mess with this outpost. So they're on their way to the outpost. They get there and they see that there is and kind of an unknown ship, a ship of unknown origin or markings that's floating around the third planet.
Very weird shape too.
It's a weird shape and it's acting weird because it's not powered down, but it's not doing anything either.
Sort of just there.
Yeah. And we've got the famous EM distortion, which prevents almost all scanning, but for some reason not transporters. Sure. Okay. Well,
okay, listen.
Okay.
Seems legit.
I was going to bring this up later.
No, they need to have shuttles then, because this is what we've done all the time.
Listen, yeah, the Enterprise sensors work about as well as Enterprise security. Okay,
which is not very well.
If there's if there's so much as a particle of fucking dust in the air, it's like, sorry, our sensors can't penetrate. You're the flagship.
Just get closer. Yeah. Yeah, so they're like, we can't scan anything. We can't scan anything from here. So we're just gonna stay here, but we're gonna send you there, the humans. We're not gonna take like any ships or anything. We're just gonna send the humans straight there and hope for the best.
There are a lot of moments in this episode where you're like, who thought this was a good idea?
But there were so many times I wrote, what are you doing?
Skeleton crew.
Yes, many times where you're like, these seem like terrible decisions. So in any case, that's what's going on here. So we don't know what's up. We can't scan the outpost to see if people are alive. Like there was just a distress call and then no other communication. So they kind of all look at each other and Riker's like, all right, I'm going to take an away team down there and just check it out. No, we're not. That was my thought. I was like, pass.
Have you ever heard of a probe? Like, you can't sense what's down there. Listen, if the Enterprise has at least 21 transporter rooms, it's got at least 21 goddamn probes, okay? At least.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So give me a break. Like, we can't scan what's down there. We're going to put our MVPs of the crew down here just to see what happens.
I know. Surprise Picard didn't go down. So then when we get down there, and here's the part that even tops that. We get down there. It's 4 of them in this away team. Mm-hmm. And the first thing you see is just dead bodies strewn all over the place. And they're like, wow, they look like they've been destroyed by some kind of Ferengi weapon. I know what we should do. Let's all split up. What?
Classic.
What are you thinking? You can't scan anything here. The bad guys could still be here.
Yeah, here's what we do is the 4 of us are going to form a circle and we're all going to turn our backs to each other and we're going to walk around like a little pod. Yeah, because like
what we're going to do is we're going to pull our phasers out of their holsters. Mm-hmm, yeah. Because now we see that the distress
signal Put your tricorder away, buddy.
Put that away. Put that away.
Surely this is like a Starfleet away team 101. Is it not? Like,
I feel like this is a training video waiting to happen. So you're at Starfleet Academy. They show this footage and they pause and they go, pause. What did they do wrong? And all the cadets have to raise their hand and answer because apparently there's no wrong answer. They did everything wrong.
They did everything wrong. So we find out there are 274 people assigned to this outpost. And currently 3 of them are accounted for because they're all dead right in front of them at their feet. So it's like, well,
like thrown over panels and stuff, like really
laying on the ground with the phaser just like laying limply by their side. So we know that this was not this distress signal was legitimate. This was not like, oh no, our energy power plant's about to explode or something like that. This was like we were attacked and slaughtered. So 4 people's not enough. Matter of fact, y'all don't even need to be here. Go back to the Enterprise and just blast this place.
Seriously,
I don't know.
Fail.
Yeah, but so Riker's like, how about you 2 go that way? Us 2 will go this way.
This is not our problem.
We're going to search for the survivors. Since we can't scan anything, let's just, manually, door by door,
individually split up. Yeah.
This is oh my God. I can't go on enough about how terrible this plan is. But anyways, they do this.
I was very upset this next bit because one thing I love more on TNG than anything else is when Data forces a door open.
Me too.
Yes.
It's
I love
my favorite thing that he does.
So when he said, "Oh, I can bypass the primary system," I was like, "No, don't!" And then it just.
Why are you cheating us of this moment, Data?
This is a perfect moment for that too. This was usually the time when there's an emergency situation and Data's like, I'll just pull it open with my fingertips.
Well, usually Worf tries and fails, and then Data's like, if you'll allow me, and then he just with like a fingernail just rips the whole door off the hinge. Yeah, it's like unbelievable.
This time he doesn't.
We got robbed of that.
He pushes a button because there's a locked door. He pushes the button, it opens, and there's a Borg standing there, and you're like, ruh-roh. And then I think that's the moment
it cuts to credits.
Break. Yeah,
I've literally written Borg in capitals and then titles. But I realized that I've been watching too much Enterprise because the screen went black and I heard the Enterprise theme song start playing and I was like, oh God, no. So skip.
Wrong theme song. No.
Oh God. Yeah.
Skip. Oh wait, that's good. Well, oh well.
I've seen it before. Yeah, right, I mean, it's just a Borg. And I mean, it is a huge bum moment, and it goes right to credits.
That's a good break right there. That was a good break because you're like, what the? Because of all the people who could be in here slaughtering people, never, ever, 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 ever would you think the Borg, because that's not how they roll. They assimilate. Mm-hmm. They don't murder people and leave their corpses. They quote unquote murder people by assimilating them, turning them into drones, and bringing them into the fold. So people are always afraid for their lives because you lose all your identity and your humanity and you get turned into part machine, but you still continue to exist. So this you would never associate with the Borg. And so you're just kind of like, wait, what? And then when we come back from credits, we are in a full out firefight. And now Worf has come back with the rando and they're both shooting, and
it's a full on phaser battle.
Yeah, and the ship starts firing on the Enterprise suddenly, and thankfully their shield was up for some reason. I don't know. And so they're firing, and you're like, what is going on right now? And we start to know some weird things about these Borg. They're talking in the first person. They're avenging the death of their compatriots. And you're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Riker kills one of the Borg, and another Borg says, you have killed Torsus. I will make you suffer for this. And I was like, I'm sorry. Okay. Pause. What? There are 5 things wrong with this sentence. Naming, another automaton with a name. I was like, oh, fuck? It sounds like Hugh, but
Mhm.
deathier.
But murdery. Yeah.
Yeah.
A murdery version of Hugh.
Yeah.
So
And Riker hears it and he's like, what the F is going on?
Riker is underneath the panel and he's just kind of listening to what everybody's saying. Every once in a while he takes a shot, but mostly he's just observing with a horror-struck face while Worf is firing, while Data's choking people out, and then that other rando gets shot and killed because, I mean, that was going to happen. We don't know who you are. You weren't going to make it out of this.
R.I.P. Rando. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, they're having this huge fight and you're just like, I don't know. I was just freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, this is really, because their brutality of the Borg, because Borg don't fight like that either. Borg walk directly into the line of fire and they calmly shoot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they calmly shoot you and they have shields and maybe the first one falls down, but then the second one has like reconfigured their shield. So now that same phaser fire doesn't work against them. And so they just like shoot you in the face. And then if you like rearrange your phaser and shoot the second one, the third one comes and shoots you in the face. Like they're very calculated and calm and they just, but here they're like diving behind stuff and they're fighting really brutally. Yeah, exactly. They're shooting with their hands. And I mean, they've got these
so
cool,
like hand
I love
cannons.
the wrist cannon. It's so cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah. And you're like, who are these people? What is going on? And how could they possibly get out of this situation? And a Borg jumps out and attacks Data. And he's trying to choke Data. And Data's like, two can play at this game. And so he chokes the Borg back and lifts him in the air. This is where we get the Data super strength. Since we didn't get it with opening the doors.
I know.
We get him lifting a Borg feet into the air by his freaking neck. And he's telling him to like stop, and he just loses it. And he just starts yelling at him, and he's like, stop. Chokes the guy out, throws the drone against the wall. The drone is now dead.
Yeah, sure
and he
is.
goes over to the dead drone and chokes him some more. And you're like, oh my gosh. And you just see him like seething. And you're like, again, there's a lot of WTF moments. And just this first, I think we're at minute 5 at this point.
I know. Suddenly Data is experiencing emotions and they're the emotions you least want Data to experience, like rage and
a thirst for violence or something.
Yes. Like absolute thirst for violence and like pleasure in violence. It's like, no, you know what? I really just let's start off, if we're going to be giving Data emotions, let's start off with like chill and just see how that goes. You know what I mean? Like start off with like,
vibes. Let's start with vibes.
God, spoken like such a Gen Zer. Yeah. No, it's very much like, let's just give him like contentment and see how he does, and then we can scale up from there. But like bloodlust, that would not be my first choice.
Yeah,
it's quite interesting to see him fight like that, because a bit like the Borg, you're used to when Data does have to like incapacitate someone, it's very clinical and like effortless, and he's not really trying to hurt anyone.
Yes, you're right.
This is almost like it's not efficient at all. It's literally just like you say, like rage, like getting hold of them. And I think it's interesting that we've just seen another, I say many established characters of the Borg acting so differently, and then to see it again in him is quite a good parallel.
Yeah, it sort of becomes like you feel like you've stepped through the looking glass into this universe where like the rules don't exist anymore. And that's really disorienting for everyone. And
I think that's what makes it really engaging, right? That's why we're so like, what?
Yes.
And Cronus, I think, is the drone who's like telling who everybody is. And he's like, such and such Klingon, such and such human, or whatever. Then when he sees Data, he's like, there's the android Data. And then they all disappear.
Yes. It's like, we have found him basically, and they all beam away. And it's like, what? Wait, what? Now in orbit, this crazy looking alien ship pulls away and the Enterprise plots an intercept course and fires photon torpedoes. But the alien ship enters like this subspace tear and disappears. And in my notes, I wrote, what is happening?
That looked so cool.
My favorite thing about this is if you look, when the person presses the fire torpedo button, it is massive.
Is
like,
it?
like on
missed
the
it.
LCAR's screen, normally the buttons, there's many
They're all
small
this
buttons.
big.
There
Yeah.
is one enormous button, big grey button, and it's like fire torpedoes. Like, anyone could lean on that console. Anything could happen. You think that fire torpedoes would be like, are you sure you want to fight? Yes, yes, I do. But no, like, seriously, they need to get someone to, like, a health and safety officer on this ship.
We've got some two-factor authentication for all the torpedo shots. Are you sure? Are you really sure? My thing about the torpedoes is that they always just fly into space, and if they miss, they keep going, and it's space.
Like, where do
so
they
they're going to hit something at some time. And so
some random cargo smuggler is like, just out of the sky, just blown out. How many accidental deaths do you think Starfleet has caused by just errant photons going for like 10 years and then hitting like a moon or something?
Yes, I would say a lot. We should. I feel like that should be a Lower Decks episode, but I have not watched.
I was just going to say there should be a Lower Decks job, which is going and finding all of the unexploded ordnance
before they destroy like helpless planets and moons and craters and stuff. Anyways, so this tear in space looks so cool. You're like, what just happened? Because it wasn't like they warped away. It was just like the ship is gone. It is gone.
Yes. It went through this. It felt very much like a magician mirror trick where it just kind of stepped into the space and suddenly it wasn't there. And it's like, what is happening? Now, as the dust settles down on the outpost, Riker's like, Data, are you all right? What happened? And Data
he's
goes,
like making this fist.
Yeah. Yes. He's got the clenching fist of anger. And Data goes, I got angry. Like, he's back to regular Data.
Back to Data, but he's puzzled. He's very puzzled.
I'd be like, hey, gang, can we just like pop him in the brig for like a cool 24 hours and just figure out what's happening?
To Troy immediately. Like, brig makes sense, but I just feel like because he's back to himself. Yeah, but he just had some kind of break or something. So I'd be let's go ahead and get you in that office. Troy ain't got nothing to do.
Yeah,
I'm not sure she did a brilliant job later on anyway, but
I think she did the best she could with what she had, and it just came back to bite her. But at the time, we didn't know that was going to happen. So I think that was been more helpful than the brig. But in any case, Data knows something's wrong, and he takes himself off of active duty. He's like, let me go ahead and not, which is like so such emotional intelligence, right? To be like, you know what? I'm not myself. Maybe I shouldn't be doing my job right now in my current state.
I'm going to go ahead and recuse myself. Right. Turkey club on the way out, and I'll see you guys in like 2 hours when I figure out what's going on. Yeah. So Riker's like, okay, I'm going to brief the senior team. And I love the way he kind of talks about it. This is a classic AAR. So in the military, they do what's called an after action report where they talk about what they saw, what they did well, what they thought they could have done better next time, whatever. But he is breaking it down in very militaristic terms, which I really appreciated. He's like, they're fast, aggressive, angry, vengeful. Like, it was more like fighting Klingons and Borg. And then he looks at Worf and he's like, no offense, buddy. And Worf is like, oh no, these are all good things like that we do.
He's like, no, none taken, none at all. He's like, we are amazing warriors. Yeah. I agree. Continue.
Yeah. But what's most frightening is that Riker's like, they don't behave as though they're part of a collective. They're using, they're speaking in the first person and all this stuff. And Picard is like, F, right? He's like,
and Beverly and Troy are like, he was the only one who ever spoke as an individual. And Troy says that, and Beverly's like, do you think Hugh might have something to do with this? And they all kind of look around the table at each other. Like, I hope not.
Yeah, because that would make us sort of the architects of this.
That's what I thought in this episode, where it was like, when they break your expectations, that makes the scary thing like 1,000 times scarier. Yes. And that is no more true than with the Borg. Now that they are focused and vengeful, that makes them 1,000 times more deadly than when they were clinical and just unemotional about their mass, destruction.
Oh yeah, no, it's not this sort of sterile procedure anymore. Now it's personal.
Which is what we don't want.
I don't mean that to sound like a tagline, but it is. Yeah, it's like, now this shit is deeply personal for the Borg, and they've got a plan, and we don't know what it is yet, and that's really terrifying because you're like, oh fuck, like regular original variety Borg were scary enough, but now spicy ranch Borg are like, oh crap, like this is so much worse.
I think it's scary as well because like, like original, like Borg classic, although obviously they are a collective, when we normally see them, they do attack like one by one. They don't kind of cooperate.
Mhm.
So I think it's
Yes.
that idea that now they identify each other and they want to help each other. And it's the
Yes.
idea that they might actually cooperate and therefore be a lot more dangerous. I
Like a
think that's
stronger
what I find
team.
scary. At least even when they've like gone onto a Borg cube, they'd
Mhm.
still come at them one at a time, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not great, but you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was something I found quite creepy.
It's like superheroes when they fight in movies and like the bad guys attack them one at a time or two at a time, so the choreography is really clean. Like that's what Borg
But
do.
instead of what a real battle is, where it's like 1,000 attack 2 people at a time, and they just end up getting ripped apart.
There's just
Yeah,
one
leg
baddie
flying,
waiting at
so-
the back like this.
Yes, they're just
punched.
they're waiting at the back to jump into the fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, this makes this unbeatable foe just a little bit more unbeatable.
Yeah, I feel like in this instance, the Borg really did put the I in team, and they made themselves so much scarier, and you're like, fuck. Now, in main engineering, Data and Geordi are working to figure out like where these emotions came from. And Geordi's like, well, your positronic net checks out just fine. Like there's nothing to indicate like behavioral anomaly. And Data's like, yeah, no, I ran that check as well, and everything came out fine. So I can't understand why I felt this emotion. And this scene was, I really loved it because it talked about like, how do you describe what an emotion is? And it's like, oh my gosh, this is just the two perfect people to be having this conversation. Data's like, Geordi, how do you know you felt angry? Like, if you can't really pinpoint what an emotion feels like, how do you know if you felt it?
And he
And
said
so-
it in a really polite way, I think. It
Yes.
wasn't like, buddy, like you would know an emotion. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
He was just like-
exactly.
he was like, I don't mean this to sound bad, but how could you really tell that it was an emotion and not just a surge of like
Yeah.
electricity through your neural net or something?
Like, are
I
you
find this
sure?
really interesting because there is a condition called alexithymia. I think that's how you say it, which is quite common in a lot of autistic people, which is like an
Oh.
inability to describe or express or distinguish your emotions.
Interesting.
I've always felt that Data does have emotions. He just experiences them differently to everybody else and has no basis for comparison, which is how a lot of autistic people feel, I think. So I love this idea that he's saying, well, what are you comparing it to? And he has no
Yes.
basis for comparison. And so often, like even within this scene, I wrote down there's a bit where Geordi says, well, I hate to think that anger is all that you're capable of feeling. Immediately Data looks sad, as he has looked sad or anxious or all these other things throughout the series. It's like just because your version of an emotion doesn't look like everybody else's or doesn't come along with the same physical sensations, it doesn't mean that you're not having an emotion. So that's why I find like these two episodes so interesting from that point of view.
That is interesting.
I love that. I love that on so many levels. I was just learning about writing because I'm kind of getting back into writing, which I used to love as a little kid, but I haven't done it in a really long time. And anyways, somebody was talking about writing characters that are realistic and writing characters that have a trauma response. And she was saying a lot of times in movies, when we see a character with a trauma response, there's a certain way we expect them to feel. Like if they were victimized in this certain way, then they have to be crying and, yelling and sad and not, eating ice cream or whatever. And she was saying, but with her work as a psychiatrist or psychologist, I forget which one, but whichever one works with people, I don't know. But whatever she used to do before she became a writer, she said in the trauma response, a lot of times in real people, the trauma response is not like that. There are no big emotions. It's very flat. And then she said
the numbing of all those emotions.
It's numbing, exactly. And that's what causes or has caused in the past, police officers and things like that to not believe them.
Yes.
That happened because they're not having the expected trauma response. And that is Data. Like I totally agree with you, Pip, that he has emotions. He always has showed emotions, but he displays them differently. They're maybe muted compared to what we would expect. Like when he found his head in Time's Arrow, he was like fascinating, right? Whereas most people would be like, oh my gosh, they would be screaming and crying and freaking out, but because his emotional response wasn't the expected response, it freaked everybody out even more because they're like, and Geordi and Data had a conversation then in 10 Forward where he was like, do you need to talk about it? Does this bother you? And he's like, no. Does it bother you? And he's like,
yeah.
Yeah. Do you need to talk about it? He's like, yes, I need to talk about it. This bothers me. Like, this has to bother you, Data. It has to. And Data's just like, I experienced it differently. And it's like a two-way street. The person, Geordi, who's representing, the emotionally aware people, also tends to try to see things from Data's perspective, which is what I really love about this friendship. It's not just quote unquote teaching Data how to do it like everybody else does it, but it's Data teaching Geordi as well, like about his responses and how he experiences life. And the scene I love right here is when when Data is saying, well, maybe you can tell me what you felt like when you were angry so I can have a basis of comparison. And Geordi just keeps saying, well, I felt this way and I felt this way and I felt this way. And Data says, can you describe it without describing another feeling? And he was like, no, I just kind of feel it. And then Data does the exact same motions with his hands. And he goes, yeah, that was me too. I just feel it, like the same thing. And Geordi's just like, all right, then you did. You know?
I guess it's a bit like, it's impossible for us to know what everybody is seeing. And I mean that just in like a very technical definition where it's like, okay, I'm holding a blue can of soda or something, right? But it's like, how do you know that you're seeing the same shade blue as I'm seeing? Like we both just call it blue, right? Where it's like, how can you describe this without using other colors? How can you describe this without using other emotions as like a baseline? And I did like just a mini dive on like emotions and how they're sort of classified. And I think that anger is really interesting. And actually, Shereese, you're the one who kind of turned me on to this years ago when we were talking about something else. And like, it's always kind of stuck with me. So behavioral scientists kind of classified like primary emotions as like sadness or happiness or joy. And then there are like secondary emotions, like anger or anxiety or irritation. And anger is often called a secondary emotion because we tend to resort to anger in order to protect ourselves or cover up for another emotion that we're feeling. So you might feel shame or hopeless. And those are very disempowering feelings, right? Like you can't really do anything with that. But if you feel angry, you can slam the door, you can storm out, you can
curse out your sister. Not that I've ever done that. You could.
Yes, it's like you can take an action and that even if the action is negative and it doesn't feel great in the long run, taking action feels better than feeling helpless against that emotion, right? So I love when Geordi is like, I just felt angry. And Data's like, I love how Data sort of mimics Geordi's body language. And he goes, I simply felt angry as well. And it's like, oh, that's so interesting. By the way, also to speak to the sort of the fight or flight or the trauma response, I was listening to a really interesting TED talk, I think it was, about, fight or flight and how behaviorists have a much better understanding now of fight or flight because, it's very common. It's all too common, unfortunately, to hear a story of like a woman who is sexually assaulted and reports it. And police tend to be like, well, why didn't you fight back? Or why didn't you run away? Because they think of fight or flight. But there's actually a much more broad understanding now. It's fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. So freeze, my mom is that way. I mean, she accidentally lit like a pan of like olive oil. She was frying something and the flame was too hot and like the pan like burst into flames. And I was in my mom's kitchen and I watched her and she just froze solid, like absolute just panic froze. And I was like, okay, I got this. Like, don't move. You're probably going to make it worse by accident. Yeah. Don't do anything. I got this. Right. And then fawn is another one. And I've experienced that myself when I have felt in danger.
What is fawn? I've only heard fight, flight, or freeze. I don't know what that is.
Fawn is, well, let me tell you, I was in an Uber years ago, coming home like late at night, and the Uber driver made a very inappropriate sexual comment about me.
Jesus,
and I was like, it's like 10:30 at night. Like my boyfriend at the time was working in restaurants. So he was like working late. I was on my own. And this driver made a comment about like, I could drag you into the bushes and have my way with you. And like, who would even know? And I was like, like I immediately started panicking. So I started fawning on him. I was like, oh no, not me. That's sweet of you to say. But like, okay, this is my house here. You can just, and I just had him pull over and I got out and I basically pretended like I was going into some neighbor's house. And as soon as he drove away, I just like ran to my house and called my boyfriend, who came home and he was like, oh my gosh. And I felt a tremendous amount of guilt afterwards because I was like, I fawned all over him because that was my like response to
you felt
be like,
guilty that you didn't fight or something like that.
Yes, I felt guilty honestly, that I wasn't like, fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
Because
but you did something to save your life.
I'm only 5'1" on a good day. And this dude was, I don't know how big, right? But it's like, I'm strong for my size, but that doesn't mean strong compared to like a 6'2" person, right?
Yeah.
So I did the like silly girl laugh mode to just disarm him so he would leave me alone. And then I got the fuck out of there.
So you can escape.
But yeah, so that's what Fawn is, and that's where a lot
where
of
you play along with the victimizer to try to
a lot of people
protect
do
yourself.
that. If particularly like, I don't know, if you're at a bar or like on public transport and someone starts saying stuff, you're just like, just play nice until I can get away.
Yes, because it's a risk, it's a calculated like risk reward type thing where you're like, if I just play along, there's a less chance of me being assaulted or something. And usually in that moment when you're in a trauma response, you're just trying to figure out what the fuck is even happening to you. Like, you're not looking at it from a third person where it's like, how did you know that they had a gun? How did you not know?
No. It's just like the pan catching fire with your mom. Like, it happens. And then you have seconds to decide what to do. And your body and your mind just does it. It just does a thing. There's no time to calculate and think about, and why were you in that situation and blah, blah, blah. That all comes way later. In the moment, it's just like survival. And that's what we see when Data chokes out that Borg, right? Is that he's in survival, like something about that triggered that survival mode. And he chose fight. You know, we could argue that maybe Riker chose freeze. He was just laying there like, what is going on? To Pip's point, you do see Data's face fall of like, oh man, I hope, you know, if all the emotions that I can feel is, you know, just anger, that's not good. And then he talks about it later with Troy, which I think Troy did a great job. It just bit her later on, but I think she did a great job in this episode. So anyways, next scene, we're in the ready room with Admiral Nechayev, who we have seen many a time before.
I know.
And I don't super love her, because last time she was here, she put what was that? Captain
Jellicoe.
Dick? Yeah, she put Captain Jellicoe in charge, who we decided during that episode review he was the right man for the job, but man, he's the worst. And so she's
sometimes the worst person is the best person for the job.
Yes, if you've ever seen Leverage, like that's the line from the show.
Oh, okay.
The bad guys make the best good guys.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So she's back, and I'm kind of like, I feel very dubious now that I'm seeing her face. I'm like, is she going to actually help the situation, or is she going to make some other stupid decision that's going to ruin everything? And I guess a little bit of both. So she says reinforcements are on the way. She's in charge of whatever ship. I forgot the name of her ship, but she said, okay, you're going to be in charge of the Crazy Horse and the Agamemnon, which are such cool names for ships. And she's like, there's 15 more ships on their way. If this is a new Borg attack, like, we're going to be ready for it. And so at first I was like, okay, cool, she's helping. And then she turns on him and she's like, what is in this report about Hugh and how you let him go when you had the opportunity to turn him into a weapon to decimate the Borg? Why did you not use him as a weapon? And she's just like pissed. And part of me is like, girl, how long ago did you read that report? Don't be trying to bring that up now. That was the time to have that discussion. If you did not like the way he handled the situation, you should have said it then. Don't try to bring it up now and be like, that was a terrible decision you made, and I'm so upset at you. Okay, well, what am I going to do about it now? He was gone.
It is really funny though, because she does it in such a long tirade of like all of the bad decisions that were made. Like, so you did this, you let him go, you did have the opportunity to do this, but you didn't take it. And at the end, I just almost imagined him being like, well, when you put it like that, it's just like, it's kind of a bit of a fuck up, actually. Sorry.
A really bad one. I thought the same thing. Like, I actually was sort of with Pip on this, where it's like, I mean, when you say it like that, then yeah, like, I really kind of blew it. Although I like Picard's response, because he's like, once the Borg was on board, he began to grow and learn, and he was no longer an automaton. And then when that happened, I had no choice to let him go. And she's like, you did have a choice, actually, and you chose to let him go, and you could have destroyed the Borg, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, you're kind of right. Although, you know, what I will say too is, Picard is our number one guy, right? He's in charge of the ship. The ship is our whole storyline. So it's so interesting to me to see him be a subordinate to someone, especially to someone who doesn't much care for him. Because we all fucking love Picard. Picard, we're like, we'll follow you to the gates of hell, Picard. And this one's like, maybe not. I need you to answer some questions.
The thing though, like, I hear you and I agree. Like, at the end, he does feel like he's like, man, I did really mess up. But again, you knew this a long time ago. It's been like years. Like, yeah,
this was a couple of years ago.
I don't know. That drives me crazy when people want to try to throw stuff in your face that if you had a problem with this, you should have addressed it when it was happening.
I mean, to be fair, she's been fighting the Cardassians and she hasn't been very Borgy. That's more Admiral Shelby's cup of tea.
Yeah, whatever.
So, two women we don't care about.
I suppose. So in any case, she says, well, you now consider yourself under orders that if you have a similar opportunity in the future, you better take it. Meaning,
you better destroy them.
But destroy them. And we had a lot of things to say about that episode when Picard was like so furious with the Borg and wanted to destroy them and all of that. And Guinan was like, yeah, kill them all, you know? And then at the end, when Picard was like, wait, this isn't right to do because now Hugh is an individual. He's calling himself Hugh. It's not fair. Like we were like, yeah, that's the right decision. That's the right call at the end of that episode. But now that we're at this episode, now it seems like maybe that was a bad decision, but it wasn't. It just, again, it turned out poorly. But nobody knew that was going to happen. Like,
who could have predicted that?
This is life. So in any case, now he's under orders to if this happens again, to send in the weapon.
Don't forget, we are rewarded with the most passive aggressive "yes, sir" of all time.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we are.
It's beautiful.
He didn't say yes, sir. He said, "Fuck you."
You need subtitles.
Wow. Yeah. That was the
translation.
That was the translation. That's what I was going to say. Really quickly, this is just a 2-second thing. The ships that Picard is going to be heading up, he's obviously in charge of the Enterprise, but he's also going to be in charge of the Crazy Horse, which is the leader of the native Lakota tribe, who in the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 led a war party to victory and earned him a great deal of respect from both his enemies and his own people, which I was like, wow, okay, like great, like leader of a battle. And then Agamemnon was that mythical king of Mycenae who commanded the Greeks during the Trojan Wars and all that. So it's like, cool, another like battle name, like very battle-y names. I loved it.
I love that you looked that up because I did not know any of that. And I was gonna say, I mean, I didn't put it in my notes, but you usually look up the names of the ships and stuff, and you're like, oh, this was an astronaut and this was a physicist and whatever. And I was like, oh, that's weird that these ships don't have those kinds of names, but they have really cool names. And then for you to be like, oh no, this is the same theme. It's just they made them battle people. I love that. Like,
no, it's very battle people. And I love Crazy Horse as well, because I gotta say, Native Americans are so sidelined and have such a rich, deep, beautiful culture worthy of preservation and recognition. And at least in the United States, we've treated them like absolute dog shit as an entire culture. So I love that Star Trek was like, we're going to recognize even a little bit of this. Yeah, we're going to give a nod, which I was like, right on. Thank you.
It would have been nice maybe to put them with another ship that wasn't mythical, so we could be like, yeah, these people are like real people. But in any case, absolutely, to give a nod and some kind of, you exist and you're total badass, which is such cool names and great nods. So in Troy's office later on, we see Data just really struggling with his emotions, which I think is good. I think this is the exact place to go. This is
perfect.
This is Troy's sweet spot. It's her zone of genius. And Data says, over the last 6 hours, I've tried to elicit all different kinds of emotions with different stimuli, and nothing has worked. And Troy's like, why haven't you tried to elicit anger? Like, you've tried all these other emotions, but why not anger? That's the first one that worked. Why aren't you trying to just replicate that? As every good scientist would do. And Data's like, because, and he kind of points back to Geordi's words, I don't want that to be the only thing I can experience, because doesn't that make me a bad person? And I just, that really broke my heart.
Didn't you want to just reach into the screen and just give him a hug? It's the kind of thing like a child might ask when they're learning to navigate their emotions. They're like, if I'm having negative thoughts, does that make me a bad person? You're like, no, honey. That's how you act on them. That like is sort of like good or bad, more objectively.
This really again, this really hits hard for like the autistic experience, because like there are so many times where I feel like so many of my responses or my reactions to things are learned. And sometimes because I have that kind of, I don't know, quite logical thought process of like, oh, right, I should do this and then this and this. Sometimes I've thought like, is anything nice about me or good about me fake? Because I learned it. And it's a similar, this is why he's such a great like allegory for autism. It's like, am I programmed? Is that all that is? I just learned to do it. I've been programmed to do it. So this idea that he's like, or it could be the absence of an emotion, right? So it's like, I think I mentioned before when I was on your Star Trek Day episode about how when he talks about grief in Brothers, that really struck me, because I don't have a big reaction to things like grief. It can take me a long time to process something like that. And it's like, well, if you don't react to something the way that someone expects, does that mean that was a bad thing to do? Like, so this kind of, all these discussions that he has, like, it hits home for me so much. It's really interesting.
I love that it had like, because you are a member of the community, like that you were like, I can like really like it speaks to you. It speaks to the autistic experience so much more, where I feel, I think maybe more neurotypical. I'm not 100% sure, but watching it, I was just like, oh, Data. It just felt, because I work with kids and I've worked with kids on the spectrum for years, and little ones too, where they are sort of learning, where it's like, well, I got angry. It's like, that's okay. And I will say this, I'm a huge proponent of like mental health, of like therapy and doing all that kind of stuff. And also like experiencing the full range of emotions that we come with. We for the most part are born with the full wheel of emotions, and we tend to like suppress or repress all the ones that are, in air quotes, negative, right? Like sadness and anger and jealousy and whatever, right? And we really want to like experience like the joy and all that other crap. But like the amount of times I've seen people really like suppressing that other half of themselves because it's bad. I'm like, it's not. Like, you're only denying yourself like your own like authentic experience, in my mind.
Yeah. And I think that acting on it is the really crucial part of this, that Troy points out, that, feelings aren't positive or negative, but it's, they just exist, and it's about how you act on it. And then she gives an example, which is something that me working with children with special needs and learning differences, that was a big thing I learned in working with them, is a time and a place. There's a time and a place for almost everything. And letting people know, like when a student comes into the classroom, they're screaming and yelling. It's not like, stop screaming, stop yelling, like I would do in a traditional school. It's like, hey, this is not the expected behavior in the classroom. But if you were at a ball game, that's a perfect time to scream and yell. That's exactly what you should be doing there. If you're at a concert, scream and yell all the time. When you walk into class, that's not when you use the screaming and yelling. You use a different voice in this context. And Troy does that with Data. She gives an example where she's like, anger can be great. If there's an injustice you're fighting against, you want to feel angry and use that anger to create positive change. The emotions themselves they just exist, but it's what you do with them. Which I appreciate that, because I feel like that's not the message I got as a kid. There were definitely good emotions and bad emotions.
Yes. Yeah.
And to have that nuance of like, no, it's just like how you express it. And sometimes it's appropriate, and that's what you should feel, is really helpful. And then Troy has this really beautiful heart-to-heart moment with him where she comes and sits on the couch right next to him and kind of looks into his eyes. And she's like, Data, when he says, doesn't that make me a bad person? She says, Data, you've been trying your whole life to become a human. And if you ever achieve that goal, I don't think you're going to be a bad one. Like, I know you very well. You're not going to be a bad one. And Data,
so lovely.
It was really beautiful. And Data can't accept that, right? He's like, I appreciate your faith in me, but I don't believe that, he has no proof that is true. He could be bad just as he could be good in his own mind. And it's really, again, to Pip's point of him experiencing emotions, it's distressing. It's distressing that he doesn't know if he's going to be if he's a good person or a bad person, because he's never questioned that about himself before.
But he's the best person.
Yeah, he's really wonderful, but he doesn't know that.
Except when he gets angry, and then maybe I don't want him around that much. But yeah,
unless he's with my enemies.
Yeah,
or opening a door.
or opening a door, or lifting a really heavy beam.
If I'm ever I was just gonna say, if I'm ever trapped under a beam, sorry, Worf, you're not the one. Okay,
right?
Data's the one.
But then here's the thing that's disturbing at this very end of this scene, this counseling scene, is that he says, after I felt really angry when I was fighting the Borg, I felt another emotion. And Troy's like, what was the other emotion? And it takes him a minute to kind of decode it, but he goes, oh, it was pleasure. And then you just see this look on Troy's face where it's like, ooh, okay, before when I said all emotions are good, wait, there's a caveat to that. Like, taking pleasure from murder is actually bad. That one's bad, but she didn't say all that because she would have to unravel everything she just said. She just looks at him, and then it's like next scene. Yeah, I was like, ooh, this.
I like this though, because I think it's a nice, very subtle kind of feed into, but really more the second episode actually. But there's a lot of like suggestions that it's kind of like an addictive thing for him, and that's how Law's controlling him. And I like that. That's how it's like very gently suggested, so that's built on later rather than it just sort of being like dropped.
Yeah, there's some kind of pleasure component to this anger. It's pleasure embedded in the anger.
Yes, which is very scary. Now, I actually do think that these two scenes back to back feed really well into each other, because the last thing Data's saying is, I think I felt pleasure in killing that Borg. And Deanna looks kind of alarmed. And then the bridge immediately is at red alert. It's like, meh, meh, where it's like, oh, that's kind of cool, because there is something external going on, right? There's a distress signal that they're responding to. But I thought it was so cool to have that go right after this sort of alarming thing that Data just said, that we're like, oh crap, now we have like further cause for concern. Now, on the bridge, they're like, what's going on? It looks like the New Berlin colony panicked when a Ferengi ship came out of orbit too close. And they're like, sorry. So it seems like everybody is.
Yeah, I rolled my eyes so hard at this, because I was like, this is again racial profiling. Like, that's not the point they're trying to make in the episode. It's just supposed to be like a funny light thing. But I'm like, oh my gosh, being a Black woman in America, it just made me roll my eyes, where it's like, there's a Black man walking in my neighborhood. Oh, it's the mailman. Never mind. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that happens like, so much. Yeah.
Out loud. You guys know what Ferengi look like. Come on, dude.
Well, I think what Riker says is, that's the third time today, because now everybody in the sector is on high alert that some like strange looking ship is coming in and killing everybody, and it's Borg. So it's like,
I did like their total weariness.
Yeah.
For fuck's sake.
Yes. This is the third time today. And Picard
Everyone just
is
calm
like,
down.
Yeah, Picard is like, Mr. Worf, will you send them the profile of that alien ship again and have them read it this time? It was like, okay, so this has been happening a bunch. Also, why can't colonies come with new names? New Berlin, New Jersey, New York. For fuck's sake, what was wrong with Oneaka 3?
Yeah.
Oneaka 3 was a dope ass name. Okay, like what's this New Berlin? Oh, for fuck's sake!
I did write that in my notes. It's kind of like that. I think that's our first time doing that though on Trek, where it's like, other than
it might
San
be
Francisco called New San Francisco. I don't think so.
No, I think it's just called San Francisco.
Yeah, I think this is our first time having like a new something that's definitely not new.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I guess because the United States is like littered with new in state names, like New Mexico, New Jersey, New York. I was like, okay.
Where's the old York? Where's the old Jersey?
They're in England. They're in England.
I was going to say Old York is York.
Yeah,
like
Old
north
Jersey
of here.
is Old Jersey also.
It's Jersey.
Well, we have Jersey Islands. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Islands.
Yeah, so we need to like come up with
this.
The Jersey Islands. I don't know. No, that.
But like York
Jersey,
is
Guernsey.
very. Yeah. Well, anyway, all right. Okay, so now Picard is over here pondering like how things could have been different if he'd allowed the team to plant that self-destruct programming in Hugh before they released him. And he has to kind of live with the consequences the rest of his life. You know, he's like, did I do the right thing? And Riker comes to him and he's like, you know what? You were in a very, very difficult position with Hugh. It was the moral thing to do, to which Picard replies, it may turn out that the moral thing to do was not the right thing to do. And I was like,
I love this.
That's such a good line.
Great because, you know, normally like in Trek, there's often this thing of having got quite a moral conundrum, or maybe like they have to slightly like bend the Prime Directive and so or whatever. But often like they do that, and that's the feature of the episode, and then the episode's over and you don't think about it anymore.
Yes.
So I really like that. Like sometimes you do that, and it does come back to bite you, or you know, it has consequences that we come back to later in the canon, I suppose. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was super cool too, and I do love that. Like one of the most impactful TNG episodes was the one where Picard was kidnapped by the Borg and turned into Locutus, and he has to live with that sort of the rest of his life. And absolutely no spoilers on Picard, the series, but it is sort of a theme where it's like he's still wounded by sort of those experiences, even like 30, 40 years later. So I love that that's sort of a thread that kind of continues all through his life. Now, on the
it's not often we get a where are they now, but this is a where are they now,
yes,
which is a better episode. This Descent Part 1 and 2 is a more engaging episode than our original episode with Hugh. But we needed that episode to set up these episodes.
Yeah, to set this up. Now, in the holodeck, Data's running a simulation of what happened when he experienced anger, and he lifts the Borg by the neck, and he goes,
"Stop it. Stop. 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 Stop."
Throws the Borg against the wall.
I love how casually he starts
nothing.
lobbing the Borg against the wall. Like by the second or third time, he's just like, nah, it's not working.
Just sort of casually tosses it like a used tissue against a wall. And he tries running it again with the Borg strength increased by 20%. Okay, still nothing. He tries running it again with the Borg strength increased by 30%. And at this point, Geordi's like, am I interrupting something? And Data goes, yes. but I'm glad you're here. You can help me with this. I was like, that's so honest and so Data. And the computer tells him that increasing the Borg strength by 30% more would exceed the safety limitation on the holodeck. So Data's like, Geordi, the computer requires the voice authorization of 2 senior officers to disable the safety routine, to which I say, since when? Since when?
And also never again. Never again does it require that. But here's the thing that
do we both have to turn a key? Like what? Yeah.
They absolutely
unlike
both have
launching
to
the torpedo. Where
yeah,
you
yeah, which really could use a 2-key situation. Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes
I got them all in the wrong places.
Sometimes they need to launch torpedoes kind of fast. So I maybe the button make it a little smaller, a little harder to get to.
Can we get like a plastic cover over it that you just pop the lid and then,
that would work. That would work better for me. A lid, so that way when you spill your coffee or tip your elbow, you don't start firing torpedoes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I really liked about this safety routine bit was I think I looked it up, and I think actually it technically in us doing it in order, we haven't got to it yet. It's in a couple of episodes time. But in Interface, there's a bit with Geordi using the virtual reality probe, and he needs Data to help him like increase it beyond the safety level of what he should be able to. And I like that there's a parallel between them like helping each other out when they probably shouldn't, and being like, no, trust me, like this is what I need, and they're like, well, because you're my friend, okay. But I thought that was quite a sweet thing.
Yeah, so here's the thing that got me about this scene is that Geordi just walks into his private holodeck time, because that's what they do, right? Nobody
There's no locks on those.
You should never do that when it's Barclay.
Yeah, no. Or should you? Because you might get a really good show. So he walks in, and the first thing he sees is like Data, just choking this drone over and over and over. And he's just like, what the heck? And I thought to myself, this is one of those times where I'm putting myself in their shoes. Like, how would I feel if I walked in and Andrea's just like murdering someone over and over and over? Maybe like on an Oculus or something. But
very
it's like
dispassionately stabbing a Borg to death. Like, stop.
Yeah, like
stop.
Over and over and over. Like, reset. I mean, I would be concerned. And so Geordi's concerned, but he's also kind of like, it's not the same as if it was Riker doing it or something. And so then later on, when he's like, Geordi, I need you to help me remove the safety protocols because my life was in danger at that time. And maybe that's what triggered the emotion. So I need to know that I'm not safe. I need to know that my life's in danger.
Yeah.
I need your help. And for Geordi to respond with, I get that, but I'm your friend and I'm not going to let you do this. No, I'm not going to let you sit here and be killed in my presence as a friend. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I just love their friendship. And before he has to make any decisions one way or the other, before Data can convince him, they get another like red alert. And they have to leave anyways. But I just, this whole scene, I was like, oh man, this is between a rock and a hard place,
Well, and I love that Data is like, Geordi, I understand your objections, but it is my life. So I can endanger it if I choose. And I was like, that right there was like, this episode is just riddled with really, really great, like powerful, impactful lines, which are very insightful. And I was like, you're right. It is your life,
but I like Geordi's response where he said, yeah, but I'm your friend and I'm not going to let you do that. And
I'm not going to sign off on
be
this.
Like, yeah, exactly. You are, just because you're my friend doesn't mean I'm going to stand by and let you hurt yourself because you want to and you can. Yeah. I'm your friend, so I'm going to be like, no, don't hurt my friend. Understand what he's saying, like, this is my life, it's mine to risk. But Geordi, as your friend, is not going to let you risk it. He's not going to stand by and let you kill yourself.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not signing the waivers.
I love their friendship so much. They are everything.
They are my favorite bromance in all of history. They really are. And I know that there's a lot of really great, close, like bromances, in TV and movies. But Data and Geordi, I mean, I think they're the MVPs for me. They really are. Now, Riker calls for red alert, and Picard is like, isn't it a little strange that the Enterprise has been the closest ship each time that the Borg have attacked? Like, something isn't sounding right. They're within 30 seconds of being in phaser range with this ship, that they've spotted again, when sensors detect another subspace distortion ahead of the Borg ship. And Picard's like, you're not getting away this time. Like, get after them, right? It's like, oh, are you sure you want to go in there? Like, distortions could be all kinds of fuckery. Like, we have no idea. So the Enterprise gets pulled into the distortion and all sorts of systems are failing. And then like, whoosh, they're back into normal space.
That's just one of those situations where you're like, what was the point of the backup? No point.
Send a probe again. So, shields are down to 16%. The Borg ship is like turning around and coming about. And I'm like, this is not looking good for anybody. And the Borg ship fires torpedoes on the Enterprise, and 2 Borg beam onto the bridge, like phasers are firing.
Before that, we get the best fake wobbly bridge acting I have ever seen. Yes.
When they're going to the cool
but everyone's going in a different direction. Including there's a guy holding onto the wall, like just a random. In fact, I think he's a yellow shirt who was about to be killed. I was like, oh, it's yellow now. Okay. But
he's right by the bathroom, which is hilarious.
Yeah, he's looking at what the other people are doing and trying to match it and failing. And I think Data just gives up at one point and just starts bouncing a little bit. It's like, at least then I'm not going the wrong way. It's really funny. I recommend watching it back because no one is going in the same momentum.
I need to go back and watch that.
Absolutely brilliant. Have you seen online? You see quite a lot. They do like the stabilized.
Yes, like stabilized cameras.
There are brilliant ones. There's quite a lot from the original series, but there's a lot for TNG, and it's always hilarious because it's so much more obvious how much they're just sort of throwing themselves around. If you find any, I highly recommend. They are very funny.
By the way, listeners, this entire time that Pip has been describing the movements, she's also been doing all the movements and like bouncing up and down and sort of pulling herself around. Like
I'm getting a workout in.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. Now, these two Borg beam onto the Enterprise bridge and Worf manages to take one down, and I thought, okay, well, this is the first time it's been helpful for Worf to have a phaser on the bridge. Okay.
Yeah, he took him down, but after he shot that other guy. But whatever.
Franklin is dead AF. Yeah, R.I.P. Franklin. And I love that after, they kind of take down the Borg and the other Borg ship disappeared. The Borg ship disappeared. It's like, they use these two Borg as a distraction to get away, which is quite smart because it worked. And I love that Riker touches, the yellow shirt's neck and goes, Franklin's dead, and just shakes his head and walks away. And he's like, anyway, so 10 forward for lunch? Anybody? No? Club sandwich? No?
He's dead, Jean-Luc.
Yeah, he's dead. But turns out one of the Borg is still alive. And a couple of things. One, Riker's like, hold on. Even more evidence that something is screwy with the Borg. Like, normally the Borg, beam away their dead to recycle their parts, but now they've just left them here. This is kind of weird.
They sent them as decoys and left them. Both of those things are things Borg would not do. They would not do decoys, and they would not run away, and they would not leave their dead.
Yeah, they would never do. Now, in the brig, Beverly has stabilized his condition, and Picard is like, wake him. And Beverly, of course, does the doctor thing she does. Like, I'm not sure if it's safe yet to wake him. Picard's like, wake him, goddammit. It's like, okay, waking him up. And now we do not have designations. They have names. So this Borg's name is Croesus. And Picard's like, where did you get that name from? And Croesus is like, it was given to me by the one that will destroy you. And I was like, oh God, things just keep getting more complicated and scary. And
now we're like, wait a minute, there is a single leader. So there is a leader. So they're not all just individuals like with no purpose. There's some focusing point here. And immediately the thought is the leader Hugh? It has to be Hugh.
Right, that's what I thought.
Hugh,
I thought that too. Like, I was like, it's Hugh probably. Right. And Picard pulls out the tried and true Borg line, I am Locutus of Borg, you will answer me. And Croesus just is like, I don't give a fuck.
He's like, yeah, you're Locutus, I'm Croesus, we don't care.
Yeah, like he basically just looks at him and then like looks past him like, next. Yeah, it was,
and that usually works.
Yeah, Picard is like, fuck, that was my ace in the hole right there.
That
now
was like my only card to play.
Like, kids these days have got no respect.
And in fact, what Croesus does is he starts talking about all the ways to kill, because he says that their new aim is, because Picard says, you don't kill, you assimilate. And he goes, we don't assimilate inferior life forms. We just destroy them. That's all they're good for. And so every time that Picard asks him a question, he's looking around at everybody and talking about the best, most efficient ways to kill them. So he's like, Klingon, sever this and this and this vertebrae or whatever, instant death.
Yeah.
And then he's like, human, blah, 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 instant death. And so he's just assessing how to murder everyone. And he's assessing it out loud, which is the creepiest thing I've ever seen.
It's definitely big psychopath vibes for sure.
Yes, big psychopath vibes. And Picard's just like, well, we're not getting anywhere in this conversation. So... Ooh, this is a weird scene.
So they're like, Data, run a biospectral analysis and see like if there's anyone communicating with him or if he's sending subspace signals out to other Borg in the air. Like, what is going on? So they leave Data alone with Croesus. And I just went, that was your first mistake right there. Because Data's been experiencing like anger and stuff in response to the Borg, and then pleasure at the Borg's demise. And we're just going to leave him alone with these extremely suspicious-y Borg.
But normally it would have been fine to leave Data. And I don't think Picard knows about the pleasure side. He knows about the anger, but doesn't know why or where that came from. And they're also of the opinion that maybe Data's evolving or something. So they're not putting two and two together like the Borg caused this, because Data's encountered the Borg.
Yeah, we don't know that
times.
yet. Yeah, we don't know
and he
that
just
yet.
saw them on the bridge and nothing happened. He didn't have any outburst of anger. So I think leaving Data alone just didn't seem weird at all at the time. Like I would have never thought Data was like anything would have happened, right? But as they're talking, this Borg drone Cronus is just the worst. He's just trying to manipulate Data in all these super psychopathic
so
ways.
Creepy.
This scene really icks me out.
Me too.
Oh,
Yes, I had such a visceral reaction to this whole scene because first of all, he starts monologuing, and we all hate a monologuer. But second of all, like the biggest
That's how you know
was,
he was evil, monologuing.
Yeah, except for Beverly, who monologued a bunch. But like, it was Beverly. So, but yeah, he starts Data. First of all, Process touches a panel on his arm and like little lights start flashing. And he kind of does it sort of covertly.
And you see Data's eyes close and something just happened.
He's feeling some kind of emotion. He's kind of struggling with it, which I'm going to say Brent Spiner does an absolutely phenomenal job
what a man.
at showing the shades of gray that Data is feeling with these new emotions. Like, we don't know what that Borg has just triggered with that little panel, but Data goes from being Data to like slightly less Data-y. And just like, it's very hard to define.
It's subtle.
It's incredibly subtle. So, I know Brent Spiner is a huge fan of our podcast. I'm sure in my dreams he is. But
hey,
Brent, good job, buddy. No, he did I mean, what an absolute actor to make these like tiny infinitesimal changes in the behavioral patterns that make Data. It's just enough to be palpable. It's just so great. I really fangirled over it.
It's masterful. And Cronus is just talking and saying things like, you enjoyed that emotion, didn't you? You like killing. You took pleasure in killing. He knows exactly what he felt because this was the plan all along.
Yes.
But Data doesn't know he knows that. And so Data thinks he's reading his mind. And he's like, well, doesn't that make, that makes you a bad person, which is exactly the opposite of what Troy said. And he's trying to be like, no, it doesn't. There are no good or bad emotions.
Good.
It's just how you use them. And he's like, well, how did you use them? You really enjoyed it. And, your programming is not right and all this stuff. And so now Data's questioning everything.
Yes.
And then he's like, didn't you like that emotion? Don't you want more of it? What would you do to get more of it? Would you kill your best friend? And you're just like, this guy is, stop talking to this
fucking
man.
Psycho. Yeah.
Tell you what, this
walk
I
away.
think one of the reasons I hate this so much is like, it's another autistic thing. But like it's quite common for autistic people to get taken advantage of, unfortunately, and be manipulated because we can be quite naive and quite easily led, which is just what this feels like. It's textbook. I think it's the way that Croesus starts with being quite empathetic, and it's kind of like, oh, but I understand what you're experiencing, and then that power, there's instantly a power shift because Data starts looking ashamed when he talks about what he did.
And he turns away and he's like trying to compose himself.
And it's that kind of simple, he basically uses logic to be like, but if you felt that and you did that, then this must mean that you're a bad person then. And it's using the way that his brain works against him, essentially. And this is like textbook. Unfortunately, have encountered a few shitty abusive people, and this is the kind of thing, and you start thinking, oh no, they're right, that is what I am, or what, and I think it also started to play into that parallel again of him being addicted, because it's starting to believe like that lack of self-worth as well, and thinking, well, I don't deserve any better than this, So this whole scene, and it's amazing how short it is. Like if you look up the transcript of it, like the actual script, I can't believe sometimes
like 10 lines maybe or something.
I think sometimes, particularly with Next Gen, like when I look up something that I feel is like quite a heavy scene or an important exchange, it's nothing. It just shows how amazing they are at both writing it so concisely, but also how great they are at performing it. But yeah, I hate this scene. I hate this scene.
I hate it.
Disturbing.
I hate it too.
I think it's disturbing for everyone who watches it because the level of manipulation here is also masterful. It's like you can see the manipulation working and you're like, man, that would work on just about anybody, but especially Data in his vulnerable state with the addition of whatever the F this Borg drone just did with his arm panel, that has affected Data. So it's almost like there's some kind of drug coursing through his brain while he's telling him all of this false logic. So Data's more susceptible to listen. And you're just like, run away, Data, run away.
Yeah.
And then there's this part where he's just like, who's your friend? And Data's like, Geordi. And he goes, would you kill Geordi if it meant you could get more emotions? And Data's just like, yes. And you're like, oh,
yes.
no.
Well, the line that Croesus says that really makes me want to vomit is Data tells him about the anger he felt on Oniaka 3 and how it is unethical to take pleasure in the death of another being. But like, yes, to answer your question, I did feel pleasure at that Borg's death. And Croesus says, if it is unethical to take pleasure in the death of a being, you must be a very unethical person. And it gave me such strong shades of like, you are a bad boy kind of thing where like, and Data very sort of like new in his exploration of like emotions. It's very sort of childlike, in many ways, but it's like, you're a bad person. And Data's like, I'm not, am I? Wait, fuck, am I? It's just, the manipulation it's gaslighting and manipulation masterclass. And the way when he's got that sort of emotion drug running through his system where he's like, yes, I would kill Geordi to feel it again. It's like, okay, we have a huge fucking problem on our hands.
Yeah, now. Red alert. Let's bust that red alert one more time.
Yeah, let's just
now
get another
for a red alert.
Yeah.
That Bajoran,
not this whole
like
new,
the prison
new
guard
bullshit. Yeah.
The Bajoran who's the prison guard right now in the brig should like send a message because this conversation has taken a turn.
Maybe they have their earphones in. They're like, it's going to be a long shift. I'm going to listen to some. I don't know what they listen to in the
privacy
24th
does not
century.
Apply in the Federation. There's no, you listen in on everything you want. So in any case, this is very disturbing. And immediately then we cut to commercial break, but we cut to the bridge and we start talking about the conduits. So now this is kind of like shifting our attention back to their predicament that they are in the middle of nowhere. They don't even know where they are, but they know there's a conduit nearby. And so they're talking about how could they maybe trigger it to get back to Federation space and whatnot. So we're all still feeling really icky about what just happened and how Data's like now a psychopath and how what's going to happen next.
Yep.
But they're talking about conduit stuff. So we're trying to like bring our brain back to like, okay, right. Trying to pull out. And while they're talking about this conduit, which by the way, sounds amazing, right? It's
another absolute banger of an LCARS panel that explains how this conduit is working. It's called a transwarp conduit, but it's a wormhole, right? Like, it's
artificial. That's why.
Oh, okay. So it's like, all right,
so built this. Like the Borg built this, which is crazy.
Such a how do you even bend space?
How do you do that?
How? Yeah. Now, the same rules of space travel don't seem to apply in a subspace conduit. It appears that they've traveled up to 20 times their maximum warp. That's warp 200. That's warp 200.
And we saw we didn't see now, but in Voyager, we see what happens when they travel warp 10. They turn into lizards.
You get salamander babies.
So here they travel at
nobody
warp 200.
Wants that.
This is why you got to do it artificially. We can't do it legitimately because all kinds of crazy
threshold reference. Very nice.
So this conduit, it's a crazy thought. And so Geordi's like, there's a specific tachyon frequency that if we like shoot the tachyon beams at this right frequency, it should trigger the conduit to kind of open the doors.
Yeah.
Of course there is. And
why not use baryon particles while we're at it? Like, why not? Just
So Picard's like, cool, go ahead and get on that. Bust out the tachyon beam shooter that we absolutely have attached to our deflector dish or whatever. And so he's like, yep, on it. And so as they're talking, Worf's like, hey, some shuttle just beamed or some shuttle just left the ship and it was unauthorized. And Picard's like, what? Like, pull it back. Like, who is it or whatever? And as it's approaching the conduit, it shoots out the tachyon beam and it like goes through. But before it goes through, Worf says, it is the Borg prisoner and Commander Data. And you're like, ruh-roh, like, oh no, like, what did he do to escape the brig? I mean, obviously he could just push the button and open it, but that poor Bajoran guy, like, I hope he's okay.
Oh, he's dead. Oh, girl, he's dead. And they took his earring.
Yeah, they took his cool earring.
He shouldn't have been wearing it. It's not regulation.
It's not regulation.
Oh gosh. And then it's like, who knows? I don't know. This is not the point, but in my head, I was just like, how many bodies did they leave between the brig and the shuttle bay?
Maybe he did that thing with the cascading force fields. Maybe he didn't hurt anyone.
He wouldn't need to. He's Data. Nobody would
I didn't even think of that.
No one would question him walking down the hall with the
That's
drone.
true. He is number 2 in command.
No one would think anything of it, but I'm just thinking if anyone were to be like, or if the Borg did anything crazy, Data's not going to stop him. because he's just so like, I got to get you to the shuttle and get you off so that we can get more emotion. Like, I will do anything for this emotion. So I just picture like that walk and how like people were probably like, huh, what's going on? That's weird. You know, and it's just like, they're gone. They're gone. They go
I did like the brothers like preparation where they were like, oh, we'll just tractor beam it back in. Oh, he's disabled the tractor beam. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
He's thought of it all.
Yeah, no, they've thought
we'll
of
just beam
everything.
him back. No, EM radiation around the shuttle.
More EM. God damn it.
Transporting them from the shuttle.
Can we put some sunscreen on the sensor so it just maybe isn't affected? I don't know. Like, this is ugh.
And anyways,
massive
they're gone.
pair of sunglasses.
They're gone before they even notice like what's up. But the good thing about them disappearing, the bad thing is like what just happened to Data. Because Picard's like, is he a prisoner or is he complicit? Or like, we need more information here.
Troy's like, as I've been trying to tell you, Picard, in this very urgent meeting, he's feeling a lot of pleasure in deathy things. So like, maybe we shouldn't have left him alone with this Borg. Yeah.
But so the good thing though, is because they just went through the conduit, Geordi got a chance to figure out the frequency, or at least pinpoint the frequency out of like the bajillions of frequencies it could possibly be. It's like, oh, he used something like this, so we'll just use something like that. And it works. They trigger it. They go back through. And within about, 30 seconds, they have traveled 65 light years, which is
super
nuts,
cool.
Which is nuts. Like, if only they had this for the Voyager. Like, that was amazing. The shuttle, however, is nowhere to be found when they come out of the conduit. So they apparently, supposedly followed the shuttle wherever it went. But the shuttle's nowhere to be found. But they do see this, they find this planet and, they think the shuttle's there, but they can't scan it because of radiation, blah, blah, blah.
Ugh.
So again, we're just going to have to go down.
Were the sensors on strike this week? Like, what the fuck?
I was so angry at this point because they don't just send down an away team. They send half the ship. So I've written, why the fuck are they sending so many people down, including nearly all your senior staff?
Yeah. Where it's like, hey, Bajorian guy who was the prison guard, like, once you're done recuperating from your broken femurs and whatever, if you could just man the Enterprise, that'd be great. Yeah, one or two things here, okay? Found the shuttle. Riker leads a small away team and finds Data's shuttle is there but abandoned. So Picard is like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna send most of the fucking Enterprise crew down to the surface, and we're just gonna leave a skeleton crew. Number one, why?
In the 6 series that we've just watched of this program, there have been many, many times where there have been situations which might have warranted this, and yet, no, I don't understand.
Yeah, and then also, Data and the Borg don't register as life signs, yet the Enterprise sensors were able to determine who was on board the shuttlecraft. So it's like, you could tell it was Data and the Borg, even though they're not a life sign. But like, there could be millions of Borg down there, and you could be walking into a Star Wars level trap. But like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
Like,
so
I was like, what the?
However, it does give us Captain Beverly, which I'm very happy about. It's worth it just for that.
That was the best scene. So the worst scene was when the captain was like, we're going to have to send absolutely everybody from the ship, including
let's get Mott down there.
Yeah, including Mott, including the people who are over daycare right now.
Fuck it.
Alexander, send him down. We're going to need to send everybody down for this search pattern to find Data. And then someone's like, all right, cool. But like, who's gonna run the ship? And then the next scene, it's like, you just see Beverly and you're like, she's running the ship.
And she goes, like, any last orders? I was like, damn.
Yeah, that scene was like so deliciously yummy. You just like want to cheer out loud. You're like, I don't even care what she does. She's in charge. I don't care what happens after this. Like,
she's an absolute boss, but we'll talk about that in the next episode.
Yeah. Oh my God. In the next episode, she kills. Now, this is only the third time that a woman has been in command of the Enterprise D. Tasha Yar was the first female in command of the ship, while Commander Riker was supervising repairs in the holodeck on the Big Goodbye episode. Deanna Troi was in command during Disaster as the highest ranking officer known to be alive after the ship was struck by that quantum filament. And now acting Captain Crusher. And I was like, oh,
it even sounds
so
dope, right?
good.
Captain Crusher. It sounds great. So, in this episode, she doesn't do anything, but in the next episode, she does. But just seeing her and knowing she's in charge is just absolutely everything.
Everybody's going to be healthy AF, okay?
That's right. That's one thing we know for sure. And Picard's last orders to her are, look, if the Borg attack, take the ship back through the conduit and go back to Federation space and leave all of us, including me. And Beverly's like, listen, it's an order. And she's like, okay. But it's like, that is so un-Beverly and un-Starfleet and un-Enterprise to just like abandon your captain and your crew and all your
Not
friends
least
and run
because
away.
3/4 of the crew are on that planet.
It's like, leave the whole
700
crew.
odd people. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
leave
was
the
just gonna
whole
say,
crew behind.
I was like 1,012 times. Yeah,
divided by 3.
Yeah, we're looking at 759 people are down there looking for Data.
Which I love Data, and I love that they're looking for him. But like,
he's not worth 759 other people's lives.
Come on, Andrea, hold on.
We always search for
disagree,
people with an away team of like
steady
4.
on.
You know what? We just had at the beginning of this episode the whole crew of the Outpost, which was 274 people, and they sent 4 people down to find them all.
Yeah.
So
but this is
math
Data
is
we're
not
talking
mathing
about
right now.
Yeah, this math ain't mathin'. Okay.
In any case, this is what happens. So she's like, all right, cool. Last orders, run away as fast as you can and go get help. Got it. Run and get help. Don't fight. Run and get help. Got it. Okay.
It feels very mall cop not being given a weapon, but just a roll of quarters to call for actual help. You know,
and
like,
whatever you do not lose these quarters.
there's no more in petty cash. Yeah. Is it?
So down on the planet, you see everybody kind of like walking around. And honestly, there's this scene where Picard's away team, which is Picard, Troy, Geordi, and a rando, are like walking up this hill. And I was just like, oh, they look so hot. They're in these stuffy uniforms and it is sunny and there's brush all over the place. I was like, hard pass.
I also thought like these are the outfits are not appropriate for like crossing rugged terrain. At least on like Enterprise, they're in like boiler suits and it's fairly like, you know, you can.
And also there's zero camouflage with these bright freaking, aren't we going into a danger zone? Like y'all don't have camouflage.
And they all wear like little boots, like quite smart leather boots. Like, you need like hiking gear.
Yeah, I was like, can we get a cargo pant maybe to just put all your equipment in something?
Then they could have pockets.
Right.
That would be amazing.
So, but if you inevitably get captured, at least you look fabulous.
Yeah. Well, they're always going to look fabulous. Whenever they get captured, they're going to look good.
It's Deanna.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So they're kind of walking around, and then Troy finds this structure in the distance and is like, hey, let's check this out. So they go and check that out because they're the EM distortion, yada, yada. They can't scan more than 100 feet in front of them or whatever. So they really don't know where they are, what's going on. How will they get back to their starting point? I don't know, because they can't scan anything. So I'm not really sure how this works. But they find the structure and they're like, I bet Data's in there. Let's go check it out.
It's a very cool looking structure.
It is very cool.
I've literally written all in capitals, why have you just walked inside?
That's what I thought.
Because they can
and they just saunter in. They're just like, oh.
I was like, you didn't want to ring the doorbell or anything, or like send some forward recon to anything. So this is not a CGI building. It's a real structure. It's called the Brandis Barden Campus at American Jewish University.
No way.
It's a religious retreat in Southern California. And it really does look like that on the outside. And I was like,
for sure it was a CGI build or just like a set building that, you know, on a tiny scale.
It's very spacey, doesn't it?
It does look very, very spacey. Cool. But Geordi's like, I can't get any readings because, you know, nothing works. And so they're like, there's a door over there. Let's just go in. And I was like, nope. Like the bad judgment train continues.
Yeah, this train is a bullet train. So they walk
and it's off its rails, by the way. Multiple fatalities, and it just keeps fucking going. The conductor is dead, and you just keep going.
Like, well, we've come this far.
Turn around if we wanted to, and we don't want.
So our tracks don't even make a U-turn, so we can't. Yeah.
So they walk in, and it's this really cool hall. I was just like, my mouth was open. It's very simple, but really dramatic. It kind of reminds me of like the Klingon halls as far as like the grandeur and the massive size,
but with quite a fascist vibe.
Yes,
incredibly Nazi-ish vibe.
Very Nazi. I was going to say Vulcan, but yeah, Nazi. Sure.
Well, I think it's interesting that the color schemes that they used on the banners were the exact like red, white, and black of like the Nazi flag, and I was like, that was. And so I ended up Googling like Nazi flag because it's like in my mind's eye, I kind of know what it looks like, right? But I was like, but how do the color? Wait, okay, so it's red with a white circle, and the emblem is black, and I was like, oh, with this flag, it's red and white stripes, but then the emblem itself is black, and I was like, oh. Wow, they really, it's very Mussolini-esque in its scale in that hall.
It's dramatic.
And I was like,
it's terrifying.
Super dramatic.
It's clean. It's empty. You know, it's not, it doesn't have like bones hanging on the wall or something like we would expect in like a Klingon hall, but it's very ominous.
There's no smoke.
No, there's no smoke, but it's still very ominous, right? You walk into this hall and you're like, wow, this is grand and also kind of creepy. And so Geordi's like scanning around and he goes, wait, there's something wrong. I'm not getting any energy readings from this light that I am scanning right now. Like, it's a light. There should be energy coming.
Like, is it a holodeck? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And then Picard goes, shoot, if you can't scan that, that means there must be a dampening field in this whole structure so that nothing can be scanned. And then he goes, wait, that means we can't be scanned. The transporters have lost their lock on us. We better get back outside.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. So they turn to run, and immediately the whole entire hall fills with Borg troops. And you're like, oh, crap. We can't get out of that one door or the other doors we saw in the back.
And they're just surrounded, and the mob of Borg are like yelling at them. And this,
which again is not Borgy. Borg don't do any of that.
They don't do emotions.
They don't
like
mob.
this. Yeah.
They don't yell.
They don't mob.
They don't riot.
They don't yell. You know what this felt like to me? This felt like Encounter at Farpoint when Q puts them on trial for the crimes of humanity, and it's that hall of like yelling people at them, and I was like, holy shit, this took me right back to the pilot episode, and just for that moment I thought that was super cool and terrifying.
I think there is something about like mob mentality that is quite scary, like when you can sense a crowd of people getting out of control. It's really was really scary.
Absolutely.
You know, mob mentality, I don't know the name of it, but there is like a field of study for behaviorists who look at mob mentality and how quickly things can turn and how different it is from like individualistic identity, and how, you know, you might be walking along having like, you know, a regular kind of day, and then this mob sort of happens and you get swept up in like the collective emotion of it. And it's quite terrifying because, you know, people get murdered by mobs and stuff, and it just sort of becomes this like instinctual, like animalistic.
Yeah, it's this pack mentality where
very scary.
Once you're in the pack, you do things you would never do as an individual because you're caught up in the excitement and the hype. And again, this is a way to ratchet up the terror level of this already unbeatable force, because normally they're very serene, and that's creepy. But now they're mad, which is even scarier, because you're like, now they're upset at me. Now it's personal. Now it's personal. And so it's just really crazy. We've got the one rando who was in the away team who again gets shot and falls down dead. And this is just not a good day for randos. Like, this is our third murder of a crewman if we're not counting the 274 people who were slaughtered on that outpost.
Oh, we're not counting them. We'll
Which we're
send
not.
4 people down to check on them.
Which we're not counting. Clearly we're not counting. So this is just a lot of gratuitous death in this one episode. And we're like ending the episode on just one more senseless death to show how vicious these Borg are and how much they don't care about you or life or anything. Yeah. And as they're looking around, suddenly they see what looks like Data standing up on kind of like a stage. He says, stop. And all the Borg are silent and they turn to stare at him. And so the away team looks up and Picard's like, Data? Like, huh? This is where you went? And Troy goes, that's not Data. Like, she knows immediately. I don't know how she knows, but she knows immediately.
The way she says it too is killer. She's like,
that's not Data.
Like, uh-oh. Like, big time uh-oh. And the person who's speaking says,
you should listen to her, Captain. She's way ahead of you.
And Picard's like,
no.
It's like, yup.
Nailed it.
Yeah, this is scary. And it's even scarier than we could have imagined before.
You're like, somehow it's worse. And I thought just a minute ago that was worse. But no, it's gotten just a little bit worse.
Worse or better?
Yeah.
I mean,
know what?
Worse
You're
for
totally
them.
Right.
Worse for them is what I'm saying.
Oh, but much better for us.
Better for us. But the away team is like, they already seem to be in the absolute height of danger. And then it's Lore. And you're like, oh, crap. Like, he's super vindictive. And then
that
he
body
turns and
armor,
says,
though.
Oh, I was going to talk about it in part 2. Yes, he's wearing like a Borg derivative like outfit. It's like all black and it seems like it has like padding and armor and kind of like the Borg abs that they have, but it's all sort of under the black fabric. It's
a thing of beauty.
So
very cool.
Freaking cool. Like, whoever created that costume, snap
and even
to them,
the
because
thought of that costume, like the thought behind
where it's like, how do I look like the Borg but different? It's very much like lead singer versus backup dancers, right? Like Beyonce will have on a very similar outfit to all her backup dancers, but hers has like a little bit more razzmatazz to it, right? Because she's the center. That's what it felt like, where it's like, I look kind of like you, but like just way more badass.
I do like the comparison of Law and Beyonce because he is a bit of a diva.
He really is. He too walks around with a fan blowing at him at all times.
Would.
Yeah.
So yeah,
his writer would be so ridiculous too.
He says, he says, "I'm not alone," and he turns, and then Data comes out, and Data says, "The sons of Sung have joined together, and together we will destroy the Federation." So yet again, it gets even worse. You're like,
it's even deathier.
Man. Like, you've somehow turned Data, who we all know is the most dangerous person in all of Starfleet, but since he's such a good guy, nobody really cares. But now he's a bad guy, and we didn't think about what would happen if Data became a bad guy.
We sure didn't. We surely didn't.
All of our access codes. And he can also imitate all of our voices for all the voice authorization. Like, we're in a bad spot.
Yeah. This is all terrifying. So this ends on a to be continued, which we love / hate. And it's just a giant bum because it's like, now Data's the bad guy, as you said, Shereese. Now he's at Lore's side, which is like way worse. Okay, now we've got Borg, who have got personal reasons to hate you. Like, you've got an EM cloudy atmosphere that the Enterprise can't help you. So it's just you and your wits. It's just, everything is going. So this picnic has gone very, very wrong.
I can't imagine having to wait the gap between the 2 seasons for this. It must have been awful.
Yes.
Absolutely awful.
Anyway, okay, so Pip, as our guest, final thoughts on part 1.
Oh, I just love this episode so much. I know I've chatted on about all the autistic stuff so much, but I find it so interesting.
You haven't. You've done just the right amount. It's perfect.
Good. But yeah, I mean, just for me, I find it so interesting, and it's such a good example of why the character is so important for me and why I find it so fascinating. So yeah, I love this episode, even though it's quite hard to watch because I don't like watching my favorite character go through these horrible things.
Yeah, really. I mean, you really did pick such a great episode to come in on, because being so Data centered as you are, and then Data having to experience like this whole other level of like humanity, but in a very manipulated, destructive way, is just like, oh God, it was tough. It was tough. Shereese, how about you? What are your final thoughts?
This was just such a solid episode. It was amazing. It was really perfect. Like, other than a lot of the stupid decisions they made security wise, consistently, which was my only complaint, because it was just so dumb. You're like, who would do this? But on the same token, like, they always do this. So, and it made the drama so good. Like, it made the drama so much more heightened. So I don't blame them for doing that. I really, really, really liked it. And other than those obvious things, I can't really point out any problems in the storyline itself. Like, it's just a great story. What about you, Andrea?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking back to Nechayev, and I'm like, maybe you're not totally wrong, because Picard does make some really stupid decisions in this episode. But also, this reminds me back to like Encounter at Farpoint, when Picard is like, oh, we've just been faced with this like omnipotent being. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to separate the saucer section, and we're going to have the saucer section go off at impulse power while we take off and try to send it on a goose chase. Listen, no.
I think this will work. We're just going to like shoot it off, and then we'll turn around and we'll have it chase us. What?
So it's not going to notice the giant saucer of, 1,100 women and children trying to very slowly make an escape in essentially a rowboat. Okay. While we like power away, like pew, pew, pew. Yeah. Maybe this wasn't,
maybe Picard's not perfect.
Look, everyone's allowed an off day. It's a big job.
I feel like that's the most perfectly British thing to say.
Maybe that's what he'd say. Yeah, I'm just having an off day.
Yeah. But no, this episode is so much more than my initial thoughts of like, I think this is the one where Data gets mad. Like, there's just so much to it. That scene is so visceral. The manipulation one is so disgusting to watch, but it's a testament to how well the writing is done and how well the acting is performed, that it does create such a heebie-jeebies kind of a feel. So can't wait to break down Descent Part 2, which is next week. So guys, thank you so much for nerding out. Next week, we're breaking down Season 7, Episode 1, Descent Part 2. Pip is joining us for that ride, so we'll see you guys all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.